Okay, so now I'm going to get into the paper a little bit. The assignment that we've asked you to do, which I just went over, I'm going to admit it's going to be a little bit challenging, I think. So what I'm going to do is run through the paper a little bit, and then you guys can read it on your own. And by that time, I think you'll be much more ready to answer some of these questions. So first, we'll clarify some terms, and you'll see these in the paper. Annex 1 countries. Basically a group of industrialized countries. And they use these terms a lot in the international level of climate policy. UNFCCC is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Should be another C, it should be 3 C's actually. So Annex 1 is just a way to identify sort of the industrialized countries of the world. Annex 2 is just a small subgroup of Annex 1 countries. And these are like the most developed countries of the world. They include the OECD countries, so the democratic group of countries, but they exclude some of the economies in transition that are also in Annex 1. Then you have your third group, basically non-Annex countries or the developing countries. Now under the Kyoto Protocol, only the 29 most industrialized countries of the world are subjected to greenhouse gas targets, so reducing their emissions to a certain amount. Developing countries are exempt under Kyoto. They don't have to worry about reducing emissions. And actually Kyoto is coming to an end this year, and there's a new sort of proposal that's coming about now, and those details are being figured out. But sort of this is sort of the state of things when Jameson wrote his paper. So keep that in mind. And Jameson will talk about the view from above. In general, he's talking about the Annex 1 countries. He talks a lot about this perspective from the United States in the paper, but in general, it's supposed to represent all developed countries. The view from below is then from the developing countries' point of view. Now, Jameson starts his essay talking about sort of the skepticism that we have with climate science. And this is important because if you don't think climate change is a problem or that it's causing harms for anyone, then you don't think that you have a moral obligation to do anything about it, right? So if the science is skeptical, then you can say, well, it's not really happening, I don't have a responsibility, I don't have to do anything about it. So it's important to keep this in mind. I don't know if you guys remember the climate scandal or like ClimateGate that happened a few years ago. Raise your hand, do you guys know what happened in ClimateGate? Some of you. So basically there was a server that was hacked, and emails between a few scientists at small climate research centers were stolen and read through. And there was maybe a handful of emails that were pulled out and specific sentences that were extracted, put in the media, and it basically made it seem like the warming trends that these scientists found were manipulated. They were changing the data, and I think it's temperature trends and also tree ring data to make it look like there's a warming when there really wasn't. And if you read into it, you can actually see the paragraphs that these sentences were taken from, and it really had nothing to do with manipulating temperature trends or whatnot. But something like this, right, can make people question, is climate change really happening? Maybe it's just a hoax. Maybe these scientists are just doing this to make money. They need funding, right? So they're making up a problem to get money. So if people believe that, that will reduce the types of moral or ethical considerations that we have when thinking about climate change. Also, there's this argument, ought implies can. So if I can't do something, I can't be responsible for doing it, if that makes sense. So we can't fly. I can't have a moral obligation to fly. Cats can't be vegetarian. I actually don't know if that's true, but I guess maybe they can't. So you can't expect them to be vegetarian if they can't be. And so this, in terms of climate change, this is an example you've seen a lot. People can't be expected to reduce their necessary emissions. You shouldn't be expected to stop driving to work if you need to go to work to get income. Maybe you would be expected to drive a more fuel-efficient car, or maybe you should be expected to turn on your thermostat at home, but not feeding yourself or not doing the things that you absolutely need to do to survive. You can't be ethically responsible, for doing those things. And also, this type of argument equates to this idea, well, if we can't do it politically, then it's just impossible. So this is some of the things that come out when the US says we can't reduce our emissions because it's going to hurt us economically. That's political will. That's not like we can't do it, right? So those are different arguments. Finally, this is a lot like the first one. So the credibility. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is viewed by a lot by like this great effort, all these scientists coming together, trying to do good for the world. You know, they're looked at as sort of authority on climate change and environmentalism. But from the developing countries' point of view, it's a group of scientists that come from the developed world. It seems kind of like an inclusive group. A lot of the expertise about climate change tend to come from that area, true, but they have it difficult in some respects being able to trust what scientists say in the developed world. So there can be these trust issues that go on that you wouldn't necessarily think of from just an American point of view, for example. And developing countries know that American citizens question climate change. So they say, okay, some of the world's greatest experts about climate change come from America, but most of America, not most, a lot of Americans don't believe in climate change. So what did that say? Those are some thoughts that I'm sure a lot of people in the developing countries have, and it doesn't help with ethically taking, a moral reasoning to dealing with climate change.